Most people step into manifestation by scanning the horizon for omens. They stare at clocks, hoping for patterns, comb through lyrics for secret messages, and pause at coincidences as if the sky itself slipped them a note. These moments can be luminous, no doubt. They touch the psyche like soft bells and make the world feel meaningful for a breath or two. But when a life is piloted by proof that appears outside the skin, the pilot's seat remains empty. The shift you want does not begin in a billboard or a number sequence. It begins in the quiet chamber where your own signal rises before words. The compass you need is not hung on the wall of the universe. It lives in your nervous system, waiting for you to treat it like the instrument it is. Synchronicities have their place. They are echoes, ripples on the surface after a stone has already been thrown. When you make your inner choice, the field reorders and the world replies with reflections. To confuse the reflection for the cause is to walk backward into your future. You step, stop, and demand another sign. The loop tightens, the day slips by, and the same doubt repeats like weather. The truth is colder and kinder than that. No sign can replace a decision that your body has not yet agreed to carry. The moment your core resolves, reality yields. Before that, even the brightest symbols are just decorations on hesitation. Intuition is not fantasy or sentimental mood. It is the sum of pattern detection below the threshold of speech, a silent calculus done by your entire organism. It speaks in pressure and release, in the subtle tether that pulls you toward one action and not another. It does not argue or explain. Explanation comes later, usually dressed as logic that pretends it led the way. You have felt this many times. The call you made without a reason that changed the month. The sudden yes that surprised even your own mouth. The path that made no sense on paper, but lined up cleanly once your feet met it. That is the signal. It rarely raises its voice, but it never lies. Relying on external proof broadcasts a frequency the world recognizes instantly: uncertainty. It tells the field that you are not prepared to carry the weight of your choice. So reality withholds not out of cruelty, but because mixed signals collapse into mixed outcomes. When you wait to move until a sign arrives, you rewrite the story of your power as dependency. You teach yourself that clarity is something that must be handed to you like a permission slip. This is how delay becomes identity, a person who calls it patience while secretly feeding fear. Alignment is simpler. You feel the inner green light and step, while the air is still round with possibility. Then the confirmations show up like applause you never needed. The mind likes maps, timelines, and guarantees. It wants the entire route highlighted and the detours labeled in advance. Intuition is a different technology. It is a compass, not a chart. It won't outline the climb or disclose the weather. It will only pull in one clean direction. That pull is not romance or superstition. It is resonance. The body relaxes a fraction. The breath evens out. The background noise turns down enough for a single note to be heard. You can feel this shift if you are willing to pause long enough to notice it and disciplined enough to act before doubt returns. Stillness is the portal. Silence is the room where the signal is loudest. Not the brittle, performative silence that is just a pause between scrolls, but the kind that lets your attention fall through its own surface. When you give yourself that kind of quiet, the signal stops competing with the world's static. It doesn't argue with panic or plead with skepticism. It simply continues to transmit. You learn its texture the way sailors learn water, by standing in it. The more you stand in it, the clearer the current becomes. What used to feel like guesswork starts to feel like gravity. The culture rewards external metrics, likes, numbers, endorsements, certificates, all the tokens of visible approval. None of these are wrong, they are just late. They arrive after you have already aligned internally. If you make them the condition to begin, you exile your power into the future and wonder why it never returns. There is a harsh generosity in this lesson. No one can validate a choice you don't own. When you carry your own certainty quietly, you stop selling your momentum to the marketplace of opinions. You stop training your nervous system to need applause before it can move. To live from the inner signal is not the same as living recklessly. It is precision without paralysis. You listen closely, you test the ground with a small step. You confirm by the feeling of coherence rather than the noise of excitement. Coherence is not adrenaline. It is the calm click when things fit, the steady heat that stays after the spark. Every time you honor that feeling, you exit the economy of waiting and enter the rhythm of creation. The world will not always congratulate you immediately. Often, it will push back with old mirrors and familiar friction. That is not a verdict. It is a final check of your commitment. Hold your line, and those mirrors bend. There is a point in every transformation where distance from the old life is just long enough to be lonely and not yet long enough to be free. This is the corridor where people start bargaining for signs again. They ask the sky to send a shortcut, to remove uncertainty by spectacle. But spectacle does not build capacity. Capacity comes from showing your system that you can move while not knowing, that you can hold your own direction without props. The corridor shortens each time you do. The next decision takes less time. The signal gets louder. The world reforms quicker because it is no longer dragging the weight of your doubt. If you are going to build a life that fits the size of your soul, you must stop outsourcing your authority to coincidences. You can enjoy them like weather, but you cannot let them captain the ship. The captain is the one who knows the difference between swells and tide, between spray and current. Your intuition is tide. It is steady, elemental, indifferent to your preferences, faithful to your deepest alignment. When you choose from that place, you don't burn out proving anything. You simply move as something that has already landed and is now unfolding its weight. This is the beginning, and it is enough. The signal is already present. It asks for less noise, better listening, and action without theatrical certainty. You do not need a louder universe, only a cleaner channel. Make room for the quiet that reveals your north. Let your body confirm it with that small internal click. Step once. Let the world rearrange without demanding that it perform for you. The echo will come in its own time, as it always does, not to convince you, but to celebrate that you finally acted like the source. Every life holds a crossroad that logic cannot navigate. Charts, statistics, or rational arguments line up neatly on paper, yet the body hesitates. The hesitation is not ignorance. It is the whisper of another kind of knowing, a compass that cannot be mapped but only felt. This compass is intuition, and it does not function like analysis. It is not built on the past, nor confined by rules of deduction. It listens instead to resonance, to patterns that emerge before the mind can describe them. To trust it is to engage with life at the quantum level, where potential bends into form as you choose it. Science has begun to sketch the outline of this mystery. Neuroscientists estimate that your subconscious processes millions of bits of information per second, while your conscious mind can only track a handful. That imbalance means your conscious reasoning is always late to the party. Intuition, however, is the language of that vast background computation. It reaches you through flashes, chills, a sudden pull in your stomach, the quiet sense that a door is already open. What you call a hunch is often the result of massive parallel processing beneath awareness. The brain and body collaborate like hidden architects, presenting you with a conclusion that feels instantaneous, but is built from layers you cannot see. Quantum physics offers metaphors that mirror this experience. Entanglement suggests that two particles, once connected, remain linked across distance. Consciousness seems to behave in similar ways. You sense outcomes before they occur. You anticipate alignments before evidence arrives. This is not mysticism dressed in science. It is the recognition that human perception might extend further into possibility than linear time admits. Intuition may be the subtle resonance between your consciousness and a field of future potentials. When you lean into that resonance, you collapse one outcome into reality simply by daring to align with it. The tragedy is that most people wait. They stall until the world delivers undeniable proof, until the external environment screams, yes. But waiting like this strengthens hesitation rather than clarity. It builds a life in delay, a pattern, where every decision requires a chorus of signs. The compass within does not operate under those conditions. It only sharpens in motion. When you trust its pull and step forward, you generate momentum. The world responds, often in ways logic could not have predicted, because reality is bending around your decisive frequency. Doubt keeps possibilities suspended. Faith in the inner compass crystallizes them. Mystical traditions have always understood this. Yogis, shamans, mystics of every lineage emphasize stillness as a doorway. Why? Because stillness tunes the receiver. The quieter the mind, the clearer the signal. You cannot hear a faint melody when static fills the room. Intuition is that melody. The act of meditation, breathwork, or contemplative silence reduces the noise of fear and analysis, revealing the undercurrent already guiding you. It is not that you summon a new wisdom in those moments. It is that you remove the interference long enough to perceive the one that has been speaking all along. Signs from the outer world are not irrelevant. They can be poetic confirmations, elegant reflections of what you already know. But they are not replacements for knowing. They are ripples on the surface of the lake after the stone has been thrown. When you mistake ripples for the origin, you stay on the shore forever. Intuition is the stone itself. It drops first, unseen, and only then do the patterns appear. When you learn to recognize the difference, you reclaim time and power. You move before the applause, and the applause comes because you moved. The compass within is subtle. It rarely shouts. Its guidance is often quiet enough to be mistaken for nothing at all. This is why discipline matters. Discipline not of harshness, but of attention. A willingness to pause, breathe, and notice the body's signals before drowning them in analysis. A slight expansion in the chest, a small unwinding in the gut, a steady warmth behind the sternum. These are not accidents. They are coordinates. Ignore them long enough, and you will call life confusing. Honor them consistently, and life begins to feel like flow. Flow is not luck. Flow is precision, tuned to a frequency your rational mind cannot chart. To follow the compass does not mean abandoning reason. Logic is a tool, but it is not the captain. Intuition gives direction. Logic organizes the route. The mistake is in reversal. When logic leads, decisions become sterile, lifeless, often correct on paper, but hollow in practice. When intuition leads, logic becomes a servant that shapes the path into something navigable. The greatest scientists, artists, leaders, and creators confess this openly. Their breakthroughs arrived as sparks, dreams, inexplicable urges, only later justified by reason. Genius begins in intuition. Reason follows to translate it into form. The paradox of this compass is that it demands both humility and courage. Humility, because you cannot own the signal, you can only attune to it. Courage, because you must step before the guarantee, trusting that coherence itself is enough evidence. This paradox is also the liberation. It frees you from endless waiting and grants you access to momentum that most never taste. Every time you act from that alignment, you send a message to the universe that you are willing to be a participant rather than a spectator. And the universe, true to form, responds by reorganizing itself around your signal. So the question is not whether the compass exists. It does. The question is whether you will dare to trust it before the signs arrive. Will you let resonance be enough to step? Will you honor the quiet directive that logic cannot explain? If so, you discover the secret rhythm underneath the noise. Life is not asking you to wait for permission. Life is asking you to move as if permission has already been given, because it has by the compass within. Fear is the most persuasive illusion you will ever encounter. It does not come dressed as terror most of the time. It comes disguised as logic, practicality, or just being realistic. Fear is skilled at speaking the language of reason. It explains why waiting is wiser, why the timing isn't right, why you need more data, more proof, more security. But beneath its vocabulary is a single purpose: to delay you. Fear thrives in delay. It multiplies inside hesitation until its echo is louder than the signal itself. If you confuse that echo for truth, you will call fear wisdom and abandon your own compass. This is why learning to separate fear from intuition is essential. Intuition speaks quietly, steadily, with a sense of calm inevitability. It feels like alignment. Fear, in contrast, feels urgent, loud, demanding. It insists on catastrophe if you disobey. Intuition does not bargain. It simply is. Fear always bargains, always invents conditions you must meet before you can move. If you listen carefully, the difference is unmistakable. Intuition feels like a door opening. Fear feels like walls closing in. Both are invisible, but only one will carry you forward. Fear is not the enemy, though. It is a protective mechanism tuned for survival, not expansion. It wants you alive, not awakened. It is built to keep you within familiar territory because the unknown feels like danger to the nervous system. This made sense when danger meant predators in the dark. But today, the predators are illusions of failure, rejection, or embarrassment. They cannot kill you, yet your nervous system reacts as if they could. This mismatch is why so many remain trapped in repetitive patterns. They mistake fear's primitive siren for divine guidance. The result is stagnation disguised as safety. The task, then, is not to eradicate fear, but to decode it. When fear rises, pause. Ask, is this sensation a contraction around danger, or is it a contraction around growth? Growth often feels dangerous at first because it dismantles the familiar. Fear warns you of both. Your job is to discern which kind of contraction you are experiencing. Intuition helps by offering a subtle countersignal. If beneath the fear there is a quiet thread of curiosity, a faint excitement, or a sense of expansion waiting to unfold, you are not facing destruction, you are facing transformation. Many people confuse adrenaline with intuition. Adrenaline surges when you leap into risk without alignment. Intuition, by contrast, carries no frenzy. It has gravity, not chaos. Think of the difference between being pushed and being pulled. Fear pushes you with urgency. Intuition pulls you with steadiness. One drains you quickly, the other sustains you long-term. To cultivate discernment, you must practice noticing these textures in your body. Your body has always known the truth. Your mind just interrupts with stories. Stillness becomes the laboratory for this practice. In stillness, fear's frantic edge becomes easier to spot. Without distraction, you can feel its restless pacing compared to intuition's calm magnetism. The more you observe, the more fluent you become in the language of your inner signals. Eventually, you realize that fear is loudest when you are closest to a threshold that matters. The very intensity of fear often indicates proximity to truth. In that sense, fear is not your enemy, but your compass's shadow. It points indirectly to where growth awaits. The irony is that running from fear expands its territory, while leaning toward it shrinks it. Each time you choose to act despite fear, the nervous system recalibrates. What once felt impossible becomes ordinary. The corridor of hesitation shortens. The signal of intuition grows louder because it no longer competes with endless alarms. Courage is not the absence of fear, but the refusal to confuse it with truth. Courage is action in alignment with the quiet pull, even while fear protests. You cannot negotiate fear into silence. You can only move in a way that teaches your system new evidence that the leap did not kill you, that the risk was survivable, that the path held you after all. With every step, fear loses authority. Intuition gains it. Eventually, intuition becomes your default reference, and fear reduces to background static. It will never vanish entirely, sir, nor should it, but it will lose its throne. To live like this is to reclaim your authority. No longer ruled by alarms, you begin to design life from resonance rather than reaction. This does not mean danger disappears. It means you finally know which voice to follow. And once you consistently follow that voice, you step into a current that feels less like struggling against time and more like moving in rhythm with it. Authority is usually imagined as something external: governments, institutions, leaders, experts. We grow up learning to defer to these voices because they appear larger, older, more certain than our own. Yet the cost of this deference is subtle erosion. Each time you outsource choice, you chip away at the architecture of your own authority. Over years, this leaves you hollow, waiting for permission, addicted to validation. You may feel safe, but you are not free. True authority cannot be handed to you. It must be reclaimed from within. The foundation of inner authority is coherence. Coherence arises when thought, emotion, and action align with the signal of intuition. It is not perfection. It is consistency. When your compass pulls in one direction, yet your actions follow another, you fracture. The fracture creates noise, anxiety, fatigue, indecision. Many call this stress, but in truth, it is self-betrayal. You cannot feel whole while dividing yourself. To heal this fracture, you must begin rebuilding the architecture brick by brick, noticing the signal, honoring it, acting on it. With each brick, your structure becomes stronger, more resilient, capable of holding the weight of your life. This architecture requires boundaries. Without boundaries, your authority leaks into the hands of others. Boundaries are not walls. They are doors you control. They declare what enters your space and what does not. Every yes without alignment weakens the foundation. Every no spoken in truth strengthens it. Boundaries may disappoint others, but they preserve coherence. Authority is not about pleasing, it is about alignment. If you attempt to lead a life without boundaries, you become a building without walls, open to every storm, every passerby. Only when you claim the right to decide what stands inside your space do you truly inhabit your life. Another pillar is responsibility. To reclaim authority, you must own your decisions, both the victories and the mistakes. This is not about blame, but ownership. When you own your path, you reclaim power from the illusion that life is happening to you. Instead, you recognize that life is happening through you, and your choices matter. Mistakes no longer define you. They instruct you. Victories no longer intoxicate you. They clarify you. Responsibility anchors authority because it keeps you from drifting into victimhood or arrogance. It places you firmly in the center where balance is possible. Inner authority is tested most in silence. When the noise of others fades, do you still trust your compass? Many discover that their voice is unfamiliar because it has been drowned out for so long. Rebuilding requires intimacy with solitude. In solitude, you learn to differentiate between borrowed beliefs and authentic knowing. What remains after the echoes fade is your true directive. To some, this feels terrifying, the loneliness of no external guide, but in time, it transforms into empowerment. The realization dawns: you were never meant to live by another's script. You were meant to write your own. Yet authority is not domination. It is not about forcing your will onto the world. It is about alignment so precise that force becomes unnecessary. When you are coherent, you radiate clarity. Others sense it, even without words. They may resist, but they cannot deny it. True authority influences not by control, but by presence. Presence is the silent gravity that bends reality around it. You have encountered this before. People who enter a room and shift its atmosphere without speaking. Their authority is not louder than others. It is truer. To cultivate this, you must practice congruence in small moments. Say what you mean what you say, do what you promised. Break the cycle of excuses, of betraying yourself for comfort. Authority grows in increments, like a muscle strengthened through repetition. It does not arrive in a single declaration. It is earned daily through fidelity to your compass. Each small act builds the architecture until one day you realize you no longer seek validation because you have become your own source. The paradox is that when you embody authority, external validation often comes uninvited. Opportunities arrive, people listen, doors open. Not because you begged for them, but because reality responds to coherence. This is the hidden law. When you no longer need permission, life grants it freely. The architecture within becomes a beacon without. What once felt like struggle begins to resemble flow, and in that flow, you discover freedom. Not the fragile freedom of circumstance, but the unshakable freedom of being aligned with yourself. Transformation is not a sudden strike of lightning. It is a slow alchemy, invisible at first, then undeniable. Most people imagine transformation as a dramatic event, a revelation, a collapse, a single night after which everything changes. But the deeper truth is subtler. Real transformation happens in the repetition of small, coherent acts, each one aligning you closer to the compass within. One step at a time, you transmute fear into courage, hesitation into motion, confusion into clarity. What feels ordinary in the moment gathers into something extraordinary over time. The heart of this alchemy is choice. Every choice is an ingredient, and every ingredient alters the mixture of your life. A single decision to honor intuition instead of fear changes the chemistry of your reality. It may seem insignificant, a simple yes or no, a turn left instead of right, but the consequences ripple forward. Like adding a drop of dye into clear water, the color spreads until the entire container shifts. Transformation rarely announces itself. It arrives quietly through accumulation until one day you realize you are not the same person who began. Pain often catalyzes this process. Pain is the fire that breaks down old structures so something new can form. To avoid pain is to delay transformation. For the fire is necessary to release what no longer serves you. This is why many breakthroughs follow crises. When the old architecture collapses, you are forced to build again. If you listen deeply during those moments, intuition guides the reconstruction. Pain is not punishment. It is the signal that an outdated pattern is burning away. Transformation is simply the courage to remain in the fire long enough for the new form to emerge. Stillness is the crucible. Without stillness, you scatter your energy across distractions, never gathering enough intensity to transmute. Stillness concentrates your awareness like heat under metal, melting rigid forms of identity. In that melting, the raw material of who you are becomes malleable. You can reshape it, refine it, polish it. Stillness is not inactivity, it is potency. It is the gathering of everything fractured into a single flame. Transformation requires that flame. Without it, you recycle the same patterns endlessly, mistaking movement for progress. Another key ingredient is surrender. Surrender is not passivity, it is cooperation with the process. Transformation does not obey your timeline or your comfort. It unfolds according to deeper rhythms. When you resist, you harden around old structures, prolonging suffering. When you surrender, you soften, allowing new patterns to crystallize with less friction. Surrender means trusting that your compass leads somewhere meaningful even when you cannot see the destination. It is the willingness to walk in fog with faith that ground exists beneath each step. Only by releasing control do you gain access to outcomes larger than your imagination. The final element is integration. Transformation is not complete when you feel inspired. It is complete when inspiration becomes embodiment. You must anchor new insights into action, weave them into behavior, align them with your daily choices. Otherwise, transformation remains an idea instead of a reality. Embodiment is the gold of alchemy, the solid form of everything you have transmuted. Without it, you are left with sparks that fade. With it, you carry fire in your hands, fire that illuminates not only your path, but the paths of others. To live in this way is to accept that transformation is ongoing. You will never be finished, and that is the beauty. Each cycle brings you closer to coherence, closer to authority, closer to truth. You become less defined by fear and more defined by alignment. The alchemy does not end, it deepens. And as it deepens, life itself begins to feel like art, raw material shaped into form, chaos refined into order, shadow melted into light. Transformation is not a destination. It is the eternal fire that reveals who you truly are. Every journey into power passes through a territory most try to avoid: the shadow. The shadow is everything about yourself you learn to hide, suppress, or deny. It is the anger you called unacceptable, the desire you labeled dangerous, the grief you buried because it felt too heavy to carry. Culture trains you to present only fragments of yourself, the polished fragments that earn approval. The rest is pushed underground. But nothing buried disappears. The shadow waits, shaping choices from beneath awareness, pulling strings you pretend not to see. To ignore it is to live divided. To face it is to reclaim the wholeness you were always meant to embody. The shadow often reveals itself in projection. What you condemn in others is often a reflection of what you resist within yourself. The arrogance that irritates you may hide your own buried pride. The weakness you despise may mirror your own unacknowledged vulnerability. Relationships become mirrors, reflecting fragments of your shadow until you decide to notice. This is why denial breeds conflict. The more fiercely you disown a trait, the more vividly life surrounds you with it. The world becomes a theater for your unconscious, acting out what you refuse to admit. To engage the shadow is not to indulge it, but to integrate it. Integration means bringing light into hidden rooms, allowing suppressed aspects to be acknowledged without judgment. Anger, when integrated, becomes strength. Desire, when integrated, becomes vitality. Grief, when integrated, becomes depth. What once felt like poison becomes medicine. But this alchemy requires honesty. You must admit the raw truth of what lives inside you before you can transmute it. The shadow does not dissolve under denial. It dissolves under recognition. Fear of the shadow keeps most people trapped in superficial living. They construct entire identities around avoidance. Always positive, always agreeable, always composed. But authenticity cannot grow in denial. The cost of repression is authenticity's death. You cannot selectively numb pain without also numbing joy. You cannot suppress anger without also suppressing passion. Wholeness requires permission for every emotion to exist. Only then can each find its rightful place in the architecture of your being. Stillness is again the gateway. In stillness, the shadow surfaces because distractions fall silent. Memories, impulses, emotions you thought you buried begin to rise. Many retreat at this stage, fearing they are regressing. But this surfacing is progress. The shadow comes forward when you are strong enough to meet it. If you remain, you begin to see that these fragments are not monsters, but orphans, parts of you abandoned long ago. What they want is not destruction, but reunion. They ask to be seen, held, and integrated back into the whole. The paradox of shadow work is that what you fear most becomes the source of your greatest power. The parts you exile contain the very energy needed for transformation. Suppressed anger becomes the fire that fuels boundaries. Buried grief becomes the wellspring of compassion. Denied desire becomes the spark of creativity. The treasure is hidden in the darkness. When you dare to look, you realize the shadow was never the enemy. It was the map. Integration does not mean acting out every impulse. It means owning them, so they no longer own you. When you bring awareness to the shadow, choice returns. No longer controlled by unconscious patterns, you can channel their energy consciously. The person who integrates their shadow becomes formidable, not because they are flawless, but because they are whole. Wholeness radiates an authority that cannot be faked, an authenticity that cannot be shaken. To live without shadow work is to live incomplete. To embrace it is to enter depth, strength, and freedom unknown to those who remain on the surface. The shadow is the final mirror. To look into it without flinching is to meet yourself fully for the first time. And in that meeting, you discover that the darkness you feared was never darkness at all, only unclaimed light. Transformation does not end with fireworks. It ends in a quiet arrival, a moment when you realize you are no longer searching outside for permission, validation, or signs. You feel anchored within yourself. The compass that once whispered now speaks with steady clarity, and you follow it without hesitation. This is freedom, not the absence of challenge, but the absence of fragmentation. You move as one, coherent, aligned, whole. Life still brings uncertainty, but uncertainty no longer terrifies you. You carry an inner stability that cannot be shaken by circumstance. Fear may appear, but you no longer confuse it with truth. The shadow may rise, but you meet it as an ally, not an enemy. Pain may arrive, but you recognize it as part of the fire that shapes you. Everything becomes material for growth. Everything serves coherence. This is the quiet strength of inner authority. When you live like this, your presence changes the spaces you enter. You do not need to convince or persuade. Your coherence radiates silently. Others sense it and feel permission to listen to their own compass. Transformation ripples outward without effort. You become a mirror reminding others of the wholeness they have always carried. And so, the journey that began with seeking signs outside ends with discovering the signal inside. You no longer wait for the world to confirm who you are. You move and the world adjusts. You act and reality responds. This is not arrogance. It is alignment. It is the deep knowing that life bends toward truth, and the truth is already within you. Trust that, live that, embody that, and the path ahead will unfold not through struggle, but through resonance.